Chapter 1. Familiar faces in the news. The sun shines through the blinds, cutting out pieces of light and shadow on the living room carpet, like a broken puzzle. I was bored and curled up on the sofa, fiddling with the remote control in my palm, constantly switching TV channels, but I couldn't find a program that could make me focus. Suddenly, a news report about earthquake rescue came into my eyes. In the picture, the ruins after the earthquake were in a mess, and rescuers were busy shuttling among the broken walls. The anchor's slightly heavy voice came out. During the earthquake rescue, a female body was found in a collapsed wall. The identity has not been confirmed yet. The police call on the general public to actively provide clues. My sight was instantly tightly grabbed by a photo on the screen. I froze on the sofa, my fingers trembled violently uncontrollably, and even the coffee cup in my hand clanged heavily on the coffee table, and the brown coffee liquid splashed everywhere, as if it was the embodiment of my broken mood at the moment. The person in the photo is Vivian, my sister who has been missing for 7 years. In the photo she looked pale, her once bright eyes were now closed and lifeless, her messy hair stuck to her face, and she looked very different from what I remembered. But even though the years had left strange marks on her face, even though this was a photo full of death, I still recognized her at a glance. The familiar feeling of blood connection, deep into the bone marrow, indelible. "How can you be so careless?" Evan's voice came from behind without warning, and I didn't even notice when he walked into the living room. He took a few steps to the sofa and quickly snatched the remote control from my hand. The TV screen snapped and went dark, just like my hope that was forcibly cut off at this moment. I slowly turned my head and stared at his jawline, which was as tight as a fully drawn bowstring. A trace of strange emotions flashed in his eyes, so fast that I almost thought it was my own illusion. My throat seemed to be choked by something and I struggled to squeeze out a few words. "She seems a little familiar?" "No," he answered too straightforwardly. Almost as soon as I finished speaking, his answer came out of his mouth as fast as if he had prepared it in advance without any hesitation. My heart snapped, and a chill ran up my spine from the soles of my feet. I subconsciously clenched my fists, and my nails dug deep into the armrest of the sofa, leaving a series of crescent-shaped marks. At this time Vivian's words in the last phone call echoed in my ears. "Ellie, Evan's eyes hide secrets, don't let love blind your eyes." When I received this call, I was still immersed in the sweetness of my newlywed life, and my heart and eyes were full of Evan. I only regarded Vivian's words as her unwarranted prejudice against Evan, and I didn't take it to heart at all. But now when I think back, the details I overlooked emerge one by one. Evan's deliberately low voice when he occasionally answered the phone, the faint smell of strange perfume on his body when he came home late, and the unconcealable nervousness and disgust when facing Vivian. It turned out that everything had been foreshadowed, but I was overwhelmed by love and chose to turn a blind eye. Late at night, Evan snored evenly beside me and slept very peacefully, like a person with a clear conscience. But I had no sleepiness at all, and Vivian's photo and Evan's suspicious reaction kept circling in my mind. I gently lifted the quilt and walked out of the bedroom carefully, for fear of making a sound to wake Evan. The door of the study was half closed, and the moonlight sprinkled on the ground through the window, like a layer of silver frost. I walked into the study, and the moonlight fell on the gap between the drawers of the desk where a faint light shone. I slowly squatted down and opened the drawer tremblingly. Among a pile of documents I saw the familiar bracelet. It was a silver bracelet, simple but exquisite, with Vivian's name engraved on it. It was a birthday gift from our parents when we were young and she always treasured it. At this moment the bracelet was lying quietly in the pile of documents, but there were some strange debris on its edge. A closer look revealed that it was cement residue. The moment I saw these cement debris my mind went blank, and then I was overwhelmed by the overwhelming grief and anger. I finally understood that Vivian's disappearance was not an accident, but a long-planned murder, and the murderer was probably the man sleeping next to me, my husband Evan. I trembled as I picked up the bracelet and put it against my chest. Hot tears burst out of my eyes, slid down my cheeks and dripped on the bracelet. I bit the back of my hand and tried to suppress the sobbing, but the grief was like a flood that broke through the dam and I couldn't control it. It turned out that Vivian's sudden disappearance 7 years ago was cruelly sealed into a concrete tomb by Evan. He used this cruel way to wipe Vivian out of this world forever, and also shattered my beautiful vision of life. And I, who had slept with this demon for so many years, still knew nothing about his crimes. The seeds of revenge broke out of the ground in my chest with bloody sharpness and grew rapidly. I secretly swore in my heart that I must make Evan pay for his actions and let Vivian get justice. Even if the road ahead is full of thorns and dangers, I will never back down. From this moment on, I am no longer the silly woman blinded by love. I will become Vivian's avenger and let the truth come to light. Chapter 2. Tracker in the Dark Alley. It was just dawn, and the faint light shone through the gap in the curtains and sprinkled on the messy bed. I didn't sleep all night, and my mind kept playing last night's discovery. Evan yawned and walked into the bathroom as usual, and the sound of water soon came. I pretended to be calm, got up from the bed and walked to the study. Under the pretext of sorting out old things, I sat in front of Evan's computer, took a deep breath and tried to steady my trembling fingers. The blue light of the computer screen reflected on my face and I quickly clicked on the files, my heart beating so fast that it almost burst through my chest. In the construction project files, the date of Vivian's disappearance and the time of wall pouring were perfectly matched, as if it was a ruthless mockery of fate. My fingers mechanically tapped on the keyboard, opening one folder after another, and there was more and more evidence, each one like a sharp knife stabbing straight at Evan. When I contacted my forensic friend, my voice was trembling with a subtle tremor. "Please help me check the body which was found in the wall after the earthquake." The other party was silent for a moment and agreed. Every second of waiting was extremely long, as if it was infinitely stretched. Finally, the phone rang and the heavy voice of the forensic doctor came. "Blunt force trauma. The time of death was much earlier than the earthquake, and it was likely a deliberate murder." The moment I heard this, my eyes went dark and I almost collapsed to the ground. Turns out that Vivian was really killed by Evan. This fact is like a mountain pressing me so hard that I can't breathe. Outside the window, the sky was overcast and the depressing atmosphere was just like my mood at the moment. I put on a dark coat and a hat and decided to follow Evan. After he went out, I quietly followed his car, keeping a safe distance. The rain began to fall, hitting the car window and blurring my vision. Evan's car stopped in front of the dock warehouse. I parked the car far away, huddled in the seat and watched his every move nervously. He met a man wearing sunglasses and the two talked in low voices with vigilant expressions. I rolled down the window and pricked up my ears. The sound of the wind wrapped in their conversation floated into the car. That woman shouldn't have asked too much back then. About the project, if she handed over the evidence, we would all be finished. Hearing these words, my blood solidified instantly, and my hands tightly gripped the steering wheel and my knuckles turned white. It turned out that Vivian was killed because she discovered the dark side of Evan's construction. I approached the warehouse cautiously and hid behind a container nearby. Evan and the man walked into the warehouse and I crouched and followed them in. The warehouse was full of goods, dimly lit and filled with a damp and rotten smell. I hid behind a pile of wooden boxes and overheard their conversation about cutting corners and bribing officials. Every word made me hate Evan more. After they left, I began to look for evidence in the warehouse. In a corner, I found some documents that clearly recorded Evan's company's use of inferior cement for construction and illegal transactions with officials. Just then, footsteps were heard outside and I hurriedly hid in the dark. Several people walked into the warehouse and one of them said, "We must be careful about that woman's matter and don't let her sister find out anything else." Hearing this, my heart sank suddenly. It seemed that they had noticed my actions. After they left, I continued to search around the warehouse. In the dark alley outside the warehouse, I picked up a crumpled receipt with the dock freight number on it, which pointed directly to the evidence of Evan's company cutting corners. The rain mixed with tears blurred my vision, but I laughed out loud, full of grief and determination. "Evan, the secret you are hiding should be exposed." When I got home, Evan was already sitting in the living room. He looked at my wet hair and asked, "Where have you been?" I pretended to be calm and answered, "I went out to buy something, but it was delayed by the rain." He stared at me for a while with a hint of suspicion in his eyes, but still said nothing. At night, I lay in bed thinking about the next plan in my mind. Evan turned over next to me and snored slightly. I quietly got up, went to the study, sorted out the evidence I found during the day and hid it in a hidden place. I know that this road to revenge has just begun, and there are more dangers and challenges waiting for me, but for Vivian I will never back down. The next day I went to meet the private detective. In a dim office I told him everything in the evidence. After listening, he frowned and said, "The situation is more complicated than I thought. Evan may have a bigger force behind him." I was shocked, but then I said firmly, "No matter who is behind him, I will make him pay the price." The detective agreed to help me investigate. Before leaving, he reminded me, "You should be careful yourself. They may have targeted you." Coming out of the detective's office, I walked on the bustling street, but my heart was full of loneliness and fear. But when I thought of Vivian, I mustered up my courage again. I knew that I couldn't give up. I must win this battle of revenge. When I got home, Evan's car was gone and I was relieved. Walking into the bedroom, I found a strange little box on the dressing table. I opened it vigilantly and there was a miniature camera inside. My heartbeat suddenly accelerated. It seemed that Evan had begun to suspect me. I had to act faster, otherwise not only would revenge be hopeless, but I might also be in danger. Chapter 3: Broken Sisters' Memories. The night fell heavily, the hustle and bustle of the city was isolated outside the closed windows, and the air in the house seemed to be frozen. I sat in a room full of old things, everything around me exuded an old smell, and every item carried memories of the past, but at this moment they were like sharp knives piercing my heart. On the desk was an old photo from college in which Vivian smiled brightly, her arms tightly around me, and our faces were filled with youthful vigor. At that time we were full of longing for the future, thinking that life would always be sunny. Vivian was always so smart, her eyes were firm and resolute, and it seemed that no difficulty could stump her. She often said to me, "Ellie, the truth is hidden in the details. Don't be confused by superficial phenomena." I used to treat this sentence as my sister's nagging, and it went in one ear and out the other, but now I really understand the deep meaning of it. I opened the old mailbox I found in Vivian's old house, and my hands trembled slightly because of nervousness and anticipation. The password of the mailbox was her birthday. I entered it gently and with a click, the mailbox opened. Inside was an encrypted email lying quietly. I took a deep breath and tried to use our common childhood memories as the password based on my understanding of Vivian. Fortunately, the file was successfully opened. A large number of photos, recordings, and transaction records popped up on the screen in an instant. Each piece of information was like a heavy bomb shattering my heart. In the photos, Evan and some strangers were conducting secret transactions in a dim room, and the table was piled with thick cash and documents. In the recording, Evan's voice was clearly audible, and he was discussing with officials how to build houses with inferior cement and how to bribe them to evade inspection. The transaction records recorded in detail the flow and use of each illegal fund. What broke my heart the most was a recording of Vivian's last investigation. In the recording, Vivian's voice was firm and angry. "I won't let you succeed. You used inferior materials to build a house, endangering the lives of countless people. I will definitely make your crime public." Then Evan roared in frustration, "You nosy woman, don't force me." Then there was a fierce struggle, and finally, there was the muffled sound of heavy objects falling to the ground and Vivian's painful groans. And the sound stopped abruptly, leaving only endless silence. Hearing this recording, my body trembled violently and tears burst out uncontrollably. I seemed to have witnessed the scene of Vivian's murder with my own eyes. She must have been full of fear and despair in the last moment of her life, but I could do nothing and was foolishly kept in the dark by Evan. Self-blame and regret overwhelmed me like a tide. I wished that time could go back to the past to protect Vivian and prevent this tragedy from happening. I continued to check other files with trembling hands. One of the documents detailed the dark side of Evan's construction. In pursuit of high profits, they used inferior cement and building materials, resulting in serious safety hazards in many buildings. Vivian, as a reporter with a strong sense of justice, accidentally discovered this secret. She was determined to reveal the truth and give justice to the victims. However, she never expected that her investigation would lead to her own death. In order to protect his own interests and reputation, Evan killed Vivian cruelly and sealed her body in concrete, trying to keep this secret forever. Late at night, everything was silent. I whispered to Vivian's photo, "Sister, I'm sorry I'm late. But don't worry, this time it's my turn to protect you. I will definitely let Evan get the punishment he deserves and seek justice for you." The self in the mirror is no longer the ignorant girl who was blinded by love, but full of hatred and determination, like a poisoned arrow, aiming at the prey ready to go. In order to find more evidence, I started running around. I visited Vivian's former colleagues and friends, and learned from them some details of Vivian's investigation of Evan's company. They told me that Vivian had spent a lot of effort to collect evidence. She risked her life, conducted in-depth investigations, and was threatened many times, but she never gave up. I also found some employees who had worked in Evan's company. Because of their uneasy conscience, they secretly provided me with some internal information. This information further confirmed Evan's crimes and made me more determined to take revenge. During the investigation, I also felt the surveillance and threats from Evan. Several times I found myself being followed, and when I returned home I found that things in my house had been turned over. But I did not back down but acted more cautiously. I knew that Evan had noticed my intentions and he would not let me go easily, but I would never let him succeed. Every night when it was quiet, I would sit alone in the dark, recalling the good times I had spent with Vivian. Those laughters and joys in the past have now become the deepest pain in my heart. I looked at Vivian's photo as if I could feel her giving me strength in another world and encouraging me to keep moving forward. The flame of revenge burned in my heart and I was ready. No matter what was waiting for me ahead, I would fight Evan, the devil, to the end until he was punished by law and Vivian's injustice was cleared. Chapter 4. Dangerous Game. The morning sun shone through the gaps in the curtains and sprinkled on the messy bed. I woke up from a night of tossing and turning. My head was dizzy and my eyes were bloodshot. Evan next to me had already gotten up, and the sound of water splashing came from the bathroom. The sound was particularly harsh in the silent room, like the countdown bell of fate. I forced myself to sit up and rubbed my aching temple. Last night I dreamed of Vivian again. She was covered in blood and cried for help from me. The shrill voice seemed to still echo in my ears. When I thought of my sister's experience, my heart felt like being stabbed by countless needles, and my determination for revenge became stronger. After a simple wash, I went to the kitchen to prepare breakfast. Evan walked into the kitchen and sat at the dining table reading the newspaper as usual. I forced a smile, brought the fried bacon and fried eggs to him and said, "Honey, how about we go to the beach for a vacation this weekend? I heard that the scenery there is beautiful and we can relax." I tried to keep my voice gentle, but my heart was as tense as a taut string. Evan put down the newspaper, looked up at me, and a hint of subtle suspicion flashed in his eyes. He reached out and held my hand so hard that it hurt, but he forced a smile on his face. "Why don't you go to a sanatorium in the suburbs? I heard that the environment there is quiet and suitable for you to recuperate." My heart stomped, but I still smiled on the surface, pretending to be puzzled, and asked, "I'm in good health, why do I go to a sanatorium?" Evan squeezed my hand slightly and said, "I don't see that you are in a good mood recently. It's good for both of us to go there to rest for a while." His tone seemed concerned, but in fact it was unquestionable. I knew in my heart that he wanted to send me to a mental hospital to shut me up and let the accusation of the crazy woman cover up all the truth, so that he could continue to get away with it. I gritted my teeth secretly but still had a smile on my face. I gently broke free from his hand and said, "Let's talk about it later. I still want to go to the beach." Back in the bedroom, I began to look around the room. With a woman's intuition, I always felt that something was wrong at home. Sure enough, in the corner of the bedroom I found a very hidden miniature camera. The moment I saw the camera, my heartbeat suddenly accelerated, anger and fear intertwined in my heart. Evan was actually monitoring me and he had completely suspected me. I suppressed my anger and pretended that I had not noticed anything. I knew that it was not the time to confront him yet, and I had to be more cautious. I began to recall my every move these days, wondering if there was a flaw somewhere. Suddenly, I remembered the meeting with the private detective yesterday and I was shocked. Was I followed by Evan's people? In order not to arouse Evan's suspicion, I moved around the house as usual. But every step I took, I felt a pair of eyes staring at me from behind. I knew that I had to come up with a solution as soon as possible. At night, Evan went to bed early. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my brain running fast. Suddenly I thought of a plan. I quietly got up, went to the kitchen, deliberately made the dishes clink, and then shouted, "Ah!" Evan was awakened by my scream. He hurried into the kitchen and saw me squatting on the ground with blood on my hands and broken porcelain pieces in front of me. "Why are you so careless?" he asked with a frown. I pretended to be very scared and said, I wanted to pour a glass of water and accidentally broke the bowl. Evan found the medicine box and helped me treat the wound. While he was not paying attention, I pressed my bloody fingerprint on the spare key he placed aside. The blood beads seeped into the key pattern, like a hideous flower. This was the first step of my revenge plan. After treating the wound, Evan returned to the bedroom to continue sleeping. I went to the study, turned on the computer, and began to check the emails sent to me by the private detective. The emails detailed the collusion between Evan and the gangsters. They colluded for their own interests and committed many crimes. Looking at these shocking contents, I felt Evan's horror more and more. But I did not back down but became more determined to bring him to justice. I carefully organized the evidence and backed it up in a secret cloud folder just in case. The next day I went out as usual. At the coffee shop on the corner I met the private detective. He told me seriously that Evan's power was greater than we thought, and the gang behind him had noticed our actions and might harm me. After hearing this, my heart tightened, but I still pretended to be calm and said, "I'm not afraid, I must avenge my sister." The detective looked at me, sighed and said, "You must be careful, they can do anything. If there is any danger, contact me immediately." After coming out of the coffee shop, I felt that several pairs of eyes were staring at me in the dark. I knew that I was being monitored. I deliberately pretended to be indifferent and wandered around the street, but I was thinking about the next plan in my heart. When I got home, Evan was sitting in the living room waiting for me. His face was terribly gloomy. When he saw me coming back, he asked coldly, "Where did you go today?" I smiled and answered, "I went shopping and bought some things." Then I raised the shopping bag in my hand to show him. Evan didn't say anything but just stared at me closely. I could feel the suspicion and murderous intent in his eyes, but I looked back at him without fear. This dangerous game has begun. Either he dies or I die. At night, I lay in bed listening to Evan's even breathing beside me, but I couldn't sleep at all. I know that the days to come will be more difficult, but I am ready. No matter what the cost, I will make Evan pay a painful price for what he did and let Vivian's spirit rest in peace in heaven. Chapter 5. Mysterious Ally. In the afternoon, the sunlight shone palely on the windowsill, making the dullness in the house even more dazzling. I sat in the dim living room. The coffee in front of me had long gone out of steam, and the content of the private detective's email weighed heavily on my heart like a huge rock. The gang forces behind Evan were complicated and intertwined, and my road to revenge seemed to be blocked by an insurmountable wall. Despair overwhelmed me like a tide. I held my head with both hands, buried it between my knees, and didn't know where to go. At this moment, the doorbell rang abruptly, breaking the deathly silence. I was startled, stood up vigilantly, and looked out through the peephole. There was no one outside the door, only an envelope lying quietly on the ground. I opened the door carefully and picked up the envelope. There was no sender on it, only my name, and the handwriting was crooked as if it had been deliberately concealed. I tore open the envelope and a piece of letter slipped out saying, "Vivian is my informant, helping you to avenge." Just a few words, but it was like a flash of lightning across the darkness, and my hands couldn't help shaking. Who is the sender? Why did he appear at this time? Countless questions swirled in my mind. I followed the address left on the letter and came to an abandoned factory on the outskirts of the city. The surroundings were overgrown with weeds, and the dilapidated walls were swaying in the wind. The factory door was half closed, making a creaking sound as if telling a story of the past. I took a deep breath and mustered up the courage to walk into the factory. In the dim light, a figure slowly walked out of the shadows. He was thin, his hair was a little messy, and his face was vicissitudes and fatigue. He was a man who looked to be in his 50s. "Are you Ellie?" His voice was low and hoarse with a bit of caution. I nodded, staring at him closely. "Who are you? Why do you say you can help me get revenge?" He was silent for a moment, took out a USB flash drive from his pocket and handed it to me. "My name is Mark. I used to be a builder, but Evan ruined me. Vivian found me and wanted to expose his crimes together, but before she could act, His voice was a little choked and he paused and continued, "This is the evidence of Evan's bribery of officials and the record of his transactions with the gangsters. Maybe it can help you." I took the USB flash drive tremblingly with mixed feelings in my heart. I turned on the tablet computer I carried with me, inserted the USB flash drive, and a dense array of files and photos popped up on the screen instantly. Those unbearable transaction scenes and the list of bribes of astonishing amounts, each of which made me hate Evan even more. Why did you show up now? I raised my head and looked directly into Mark's eyes. He smiled bitterly and said, I was afraid of retaliation from the gangs before, so I had been hiding. But seeing what happened to Vivian, I felt guilty. I know you are investigating Evan, and I know you are in danger now. If we join forces, there may be a glimmer of hope. I pondered for a moment, thinking of my current isolated situation and the huge power behind Evan, and finally nodded, okay, let's cooperate. From then on, Mark and I began to plan intensively. We decided to fake the illusion that Vivian was alive, to disrupt Evan's position. Mark used his previous connections to post flyers of witnessing Vivian on the streets, and also posted some blurred back photos on social platforms. The people in the photos were dressed very similarly to Vivian. It didn't take long for the effect to show up. Evan began to receive frequent calls, and the scolding and questioning from the receiver made him restless. I watched him pace around the house anxiously, pretending to be concerned on the surface, but secretly proud in his heart. However, things were not as smooth as we imagined. One day, Mark suddenly called me, his voice anxious. We are being targeted. Evan's people are looking for me everywhere. You have to be careful. I was shocked, and after hanging up the phone, I quickly checked the situation at home and found that some things had been turned over. Obviously, Evan's people had been here. For safety reasons, I temporarily left home and hid in a secret residence. Mark also hid, and we could only contact each other through encrypted communication software. Despite the dangerous situation, we did not give up, but instead accelerated the progress of the plan. We sent some evidence anonymously to the media and righteous people within the police, which caused quite a stir. Public opinion began to ferment, and Evan and the gang behind him felt tremendous pressure. They were eager to find out the mastermind behind the scenes, and Mark and I, like two lone wolves hiding in the dark, were waiting for the opportunity to strike a fatal blow. During this period, I lived in fear every day, but when I thought of Vivian, I was full of strength. Once, when I was sorting out evidence in a secret residence, I looked at Vivian's photo and couldn't help but burst into tears. Sister, don't worry, I will make them pay. I whispered to the photo. As the evidence continued to be exposed, Evan became more and more crazy. He looked for Mark and me everywhere and even used the power of the gang. Once, I was almost caught by his people, but fortunately I reacted quickly and hid in an alley to escape. Mark and I both knew that we had no way out. While avoiding Evan's pursuit, we continued to collect evidence and perfect our plan. Every time I faced danger, I told myself in my heart that for Vivian and for the truth, I must persevere. This battle with evil forces has reached a white-hot stage. Mark and I are pushing Evan into a desperate situation step by step. Chapter 6. Deadly Trap. The night was as thick as ink, and the abandoned construction site was shrouded in silence. The ruins around were like giant beasts with bared fangs and claws, hidden in the darkness. I hid behind a pile of dilapidated building materials, and my heart beat like a rapid drumbeat, and every beat made my chest hurt. The remote control in my hand was soaked with sweat, which was the key to the final revenge. Vivian is in the old warehouse at the dock. After the anonymous text message was sent, I waited here, waiting for Evan to fall into the trap. This text message was a carefully designed bait, using his fear that Vivian was still alive to lure him into the game. The roar of a car came from not far away, and the strong light of the car lights penetrated the darkness. Evan's car braked and stopped at the entrance of the construction site. The car door was pushed open and he rushed out holding a pistol in his hand, looking panicked and angry. Vivian, come out. His roar echoed in the empty construction site, revealing hysteria. I pressed the remote control and the wall projection lit up instantly. Vivian's face appeared on the mottled cement and a familiar voice sounded. Evan, do you think concrete can seal the truth? Your crimes will be made public today. Evan froze when he saw the projection, and then he shot at the projection like crazy, cursing. At this moment, the sound of sirens came from far away. I contacted the police in advance, handed the evidence to them anonymously, and agreed to act at this moment. Evan's face turned pale when he heard the sirens. He looked around, trying to find a way to escape. But he didn't know that the danger was far more than that. The gang's spies got the news faster than the police. Several shadows approached quickly from the other side of the construction site. They were killers sent by the gang behind Evan, holding weapons in their hands with only one goal: to silence them. The leading killer shouted, "Evan, you idiot, you've implicated us." Evan saw them and stepped back in fear. "What do you want to do? I'm in the same group as you." The killer sneered, "It's too late to say this now. You messed up. We have to clean up the mess." As they said that, they raised their guns and started shooting. Bullets whizzed through the air, hitting the surrounding buildings and splashing sparks. I hid behind the bunker, my heart was beating in my throat. The melee was out of control, but I couldn't retreat. I pressed another remote control, and the smoke bombs that had been arranged in advance exploded instantly. White smoke quickly filled the entire construction site, and visibility was almost zero. In the chaos, I shouted to the miniature cameras hidden everywhere, "Look, this is the murderer who killed Vivian. Evan colluded with the gang, built houses with inferior cement and killed people to silence them. I hope these pictures and sounds can be fully recorded and become ironclad evidence in court." Evan ran around in the smoke, dodging the killer's bullets while trying to find me. He shouted, "Ellie, it's you. You crazy woman, I won't let you go." I felt a surge of anger and pleasure in my heart. "Evan, you asked for this, you must pay for Vivian's life today." The police vehicles had arrived at the construction site, and the police got out of the car and rushed into the smoke with guns raised. They shouted loudly, "Put down your weapons, don't move." But the killers did not retreat at all, but instead engaged in a fierce exchange of fire with the police. For a time, the sound of gunfire, shouting, and sirens intertwined, and the entire construction site became a battlefield. I took advantage of the chaos and quietly approached Evan. In the smoke, I saw him hiding behind an abandoned truck, looking panicked. I picked up a stone on the ground and threw it in the opposite direction. Evan heard the sound and immediately turned around and shot. At the moment when he was distracted, I rushed over and threw him to the ground with all my strength. Evan struggled and tried to resist. His hand reached for the pistol beside him. I held him down tightly and my nails scratched several bloody marks on his face. "You can't escape." Just then, a policeman rushed over and pointed a gun at Evan. "Don't move." Evan collapsed to the ground, his face full of despair and unwillingness. However, the danger was not completely eliminated. There were still a few killers who were still resisting. They hid in the dark and kept shooting at the police. In order to protect me, a policeman was shot in the shoulder and fell to the ground. My heart tightened and my hatred for these evil people reached its peak. I picked up the pistol that Evan dropped on the ground, held it with trembling hands and walked towards the killer. In the smoke, I saw a black shadow preparing to shoot again. I pulled the trigger without hesitation. The bullet was fired and the black shadow fell to the ground. At that moment there was no joy in my heart, only endless fatigue and persistence in justice. As the police reinforcements arrived, the killers were finally subdued. The smoke gradually dissipated, and the sun shone on the messy construction site. Evan was taken to the police car. He looked back at me with hatred in his eyes, but I was no longer afraid. I knew that I had won this battle of revenge. Although the process was extremely difficult, justice was finally served. In the police car, Evan was still screaming, "She forced me to do it. She wanted to destroy everything." I whispered to the air, "Vivian, did you hear me? Your revenge has been taken." At this moment I seemed to see Vivian smiling with relief in the clouds. Chapter 7. The Bloody Truth. In the interrogation room, the pale light shone mercilessly, exposing everything in this dazzling light. Evan sat behind the table, his hands were handcuffed tightly, his hair was messy, his eyes were full of fatigue and unwillingness, but he was still making the last struggle. I sat on the other side of the one-way glass, staring at him intently. The anger in my heart was like burning magma, which could erupt at any time. I have waited too long for this day. For this moment I have paid too much effort and endured countless fears and pains. Now it is finally time to reveal the truth. The interrogator said seriously, "Evan, the evidence is conclusive, don't quibble anymore." Evan sneered, raised his head and revealed a hint of madness in his eyes. "Evidence? What evidence do you have?" "It's that woman who framed me." His voice was sharp and a bit hysterical. I took a deep breath, calmed down my emotions, then stood up and walked into the interrogation room. When Evan saw me coming in, a trace of hatred flashed in his eyes. "What are you doing here? You lunatic." I ignored his insults, took out Vivian's bracelet from my pocket and gently placed it on the table. Evan's face turned pale in an instant, his eyes fixed on the bracelet and his lips trembled slightly. I opened the hidden mechanism on the bracelet, and the micro USB flash drive hidden inside was exposed. I inserted the USB flash drive into the computer next to me and clicked to play. Vivian's voice rang out in the interrogation room. The voice was clear and firm, like a ray of light, penetrating the darkness. On March 15, 2018, Evan hit my head with the trophy. He said it was a punishment for meddling in other people's business. In the recording, Evan's roar, Vivian's screams and struggles, every detail was extremely clear, as if representing that bloody night in front of us. Evan's body began to tremble violently, and his eyes were full of fear and despair. He tried to refute, but his voice became weak. This is forged, you framed me. The interrogator looked at him coldly. Evan, stop resisting. In addition to this recording, we have a lot of evidence, including your transaction records with the gangsters, documents on bribery of officials, and ironclad evidence of your company's shoddy work. Hearing this, Evan completely collapsed. He held his head with both hands and collapsed on the table, muttering to himself, "Why is this happening? I just want to make money, I don't want to go to jail." I walked up to him and said in a cold voice, "You are doing this for yourself's interests, built houses with inferior materials, endangered the lives and safety of countless people and brutally killed Vivian. Do you think you can escape legal sanctions like this?" Evan raised his head and looked at me, his eyes full of regret. I was wrong. I was too afraid that she would expose the evidence at that time. I was impulsive. He hadn't finished speaking when I interrupted him angrily. Impulsive? Do you know how desperate Vivian was in the last moment of her life? Do you know how I have been living these years? My tears burst out, and the pain and grievances of these years all burst out at this moment. The interrogator continued to ask, "Evan, explain your collusion with the gang." Evan was silent for a moment and then slowly spoke. His voice was low and hoarse, as if he was telling a story that had nothing to do with him. He explained how he colluded with the gang, how he used their power to suppress competitors, and how he covered up his crimes. Every word was like a knife, cutting through his last disguise and making the truth more clearly presented to us. As Evan confessed, a huge criminal network gradually surfaced. This network involved corruption in the construction industry, violent crimes by gangs, and corruption and bribery by officials. And Evan was just one of them. I couldn't help but sigh in my heart how difficult Vivian's investigation was at the beginning. She was alone, facing such a powerful dark force. After the interrogation, Evan was taken away from the interrogation room. I sat alone in the interrogation room, reluctant to leave for a long time. Thinking back to the hardships along the way, I was filled with emotion. In order to find evidence, I ran around and risked my life to deal with Evan and the gangs. In order not to expose myself, I pretended to be calm and lived in fear and pressure every day. But now everything is worth it. Walking out of the interrogation room, I came to the corridor. The sunlight sprinkled on the ground through the window, forming patches of golden light. I closed my eyes, feeling the warm sunshine, and the haze in my heart gradually dissipated. At this moment, I seemed to see Vivian beside me. She smiled and said to me, "Ellie, you did it. I know that Vivian's injustice has finally been vindicated, and those who were hurt by Evan and the gang have finally waited for justice. Although this process is full of pain and hardship, I never regret it. Because I know that some things are worth defending with everything, such as the truth and justice." In the following days, I cooperated with the police to complete all the investigations. Evan and the gang members behind him, as well as those officials who accepted bribes, have all been severely punished by the law. This once invincible criminal group has finally collapsed. And I can finally let go of the hatred in my heart and start a new life. But I will never forget Vivian, her smile, and her persistent pursuit of justice. Her spirit will always inspire me to bravely face all challenges in the future life. Chapter 8. New Life in the Embers. The day Evan went to prison, the California wind gently blew across the street, bringing a long-lost warmth. I stood at the door of the court, watching the prison van slowly drive away with mixed feelings in my heart. This long revenge finally came to an end, but I didn't feel the ecstasy I imagined, only a deep exhaustion and relief. I came to the beach alone, holding the box containing Vivian's ashes tightly in my hand. The waves beat against the beach, making a rhythmic sound as if playing a farewell song. I slowly opened the box, sprinkled the white ashes into the sea, and watched them blend into the waves little by little. "Vivian, you are finally free, rest here," I whispered to the sea, tears unconsciously sliding down my cheeks. The former home has been sold and there are too many painful memories there and I can no longer face it. In the apartment in the new city, everything is strange and brand new. I sat in front of the window watching the hustle and bustle outside and my heart gradually calmed down. These days I tried to get myself out of the shadow of hatred and try to start my life again. One day I received a package with no sender on it. I opened it with doubt and inside was Vivian's college diary. I gently opened it and the familiar handwriting came into my eyes. Every page recorded her life, dreams and love for me. The last page of the diary said, "Ellie should be free forever." Seeing this sentence, my tears blurred my eyes again. It turned out that Vivian always hoped that I could break free from the shackles and bravely pursue my own happiness. Looking back on the past days, the happy time spent with Vivian kept playing in my mind like a movie. When we were young, we chased and played in the yard and shared each other's little secrets together. When we grew up, although we were busy, our feelings never became distant. However, the appearance of Evan completely broke it all, and his evil deeds separated us from each other. Today I finally got justice for Vivian, but I also understand that revenge cannot really heal the trauma in my heart. The real liberation is to learn to let go of hatred and embrace life again. So, I began to try to make new friends and participate in various social activities. In this process I met some like-minded people whose optimism and positivity infected me and gradually helped me get out of the haze. I found a new job and helped in a charity organization. Although this job is busy, it makes me feel extremely fulfilled. I work hard for those who need help every day and I feel a sense of accomplishment when I see their lives getting better because of our help. Here I found my own value and understood that the meaning of life is not only for revenge, but also to make the world a better place. In my new life I also met a kind man named David. We met at a charity event and his sincerity and warmth attracted me. He knew my past but he never had any prejudice against me because of it. Instead he always encouraged and supported me. With him I felt a long-lost sense of peace and happiness. We went to the movies, took walks, traveled together and enjoyed every bit of life. Whenever it was late at night I would occasionally think of Vivian. But those memories no longer made me miserable as before, but became my driving force to move forward. I know that Vivian must want to see me live happily. I will go on with her expectations. In this new city, I have re-established my own circle of life. I get along well with my neighbors and we help each other just like a warm big family. On weekends I will invite friends to my home to cook, chat and share each other's lives. This ordinary and warm life makes me feel the beauty of life. As time goes by, I gradually forget the pain of the past. The hatred and fear that I once had have been washed away by the torrent of time. I finally understand that life is like a long journey. We will encounter all kinds of difficulties and setbacks. But as long as we face them bravely and pursue our dreams unremittingly, we will be able to walk out of the darkness and usher in the light. Today I am no longer the woman who was blinded by hatred. I have learned to be tolerant and to cherish everything in front of me. I know that life is full of unknowns and challenges, but I am no longer afraid. Because I have the courage to start again and the determination to pursue happiness. In the embers I have gained a new life. I will continue to move forward with Vivian's love and expectations, as well as my love for life. The road ahead is still long, but I believe that as long as there is light in my heart, it will surely illuminate the direction forward.